I don't understand it, but conservative politicians in Canada seem to be like jockeys on in buggies. The horses have blinders on. They have blinders on. They don't realize what's going on in the United States, and they just are in this bubble that everything is a made in Canada thing when they seem to think nothing else affects Canada. And we have it here again every day. Conservative politicians just seem to be totally not cognitively aware of how things work, how things affect regular Canadians. And Klaus Kellerman just posted a new video today. Let's take a look at what he posted here.
That's great. Well, the United States is at it again. They've launched a major economic attack on China, but Canadians, make no mistake, this is a backdoor attack on us as well. The latest headline is, the Pentagon labels tech giant Alibaba an electric car.
So here's the deal, and this is why this is important. Now they're going to use national security again because it's the card. This is where all the terrorists were originally coming from, national security. It was fentanyl initially. Meanwhile, that was a ruse. But people said, oh, we've got to clean up our borders, and they do the border thing, and all that has to do with is really just another way to promote racism. It's because of the border. People shouldn't be coming into our country because of the border. We're letting in all these criminals and all this stuff, and this is what they do. There never really was an issue. There's nothing really wrong with our border. Hasn't changed for really 70 years. But nonetheless, we've always had an issue with guns. And where do the guns come from? America. Mexico has a problem with guns. Where do the guns come from? America. It's a gun-loving country, and they create the problem for everybody and take responsibility for no one. So now the new national security is going to be aiding the Chinese military. Why? Because the Americans are afraid that the Chinese economy is going to surpass them. And if they look at how the economy is structured and how they create their economies, yeah, you should be worried because the way China has a hybrid economy means that within 10 years they'll be 60 times more powerful financially than the United States. Trend's been there since the end of the Second World War. North America's averaged 2.5 to 2.7% growth annually. Meanwhile, China's been averaging 5.8%, more than double. You know how compound interest works, so you can do the math. Let's get back to the video.
Car maker BYD as aiding Chinese military, ramping up their protectionist policies again. After the Pentagon released the updated list, the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party called it a warning to American businesses, all levels of government, and the American people. It said the companies on the list that are traded publicly on the U.S. stock exchanges should be delisted, and no American company should do business with those on the list.
So this is becoming the new national security issue, and this is what they're going to use to do all sorts of sanctions against every country around the world. That's really what this is. This is where we're going to, where we're coming from and where we're going to. You have to understand the United States of America under Donald Trump and the people that created Project 2025 want to dominate the world. You just have to look at actions and behaviors. You want to kowtow to the American president and bootlick him? Well, guess what happens? You end up like Maduro in Venezuela. They take over your country. Then with Israel, they're trying to take over Iran. Strait of Hormuz, totally blocked, and this is what nobody's talking about. You're going to have an energy crisis and a food crisis because of their actions in the Middle East. Nobody's talking about that. Everybody's just going to end up blaming the liberals because that's all conservatives do. They don't have an understanding what works, what doesn't work. And let's be frank. What's Frank got to do with it? David Dodge, former bank governor, he explained it very simply. Because all you hear from the conservatives, whether it's Alberta, it's the Liberals, whether it's the Federals, it's the Liberals. And then they say the Trudeau era, last 10 years of Trudeau, caused everything that's happened to them, which is false. David Dodge actually said, we've had 2 decades where this situation has been able to come into play, what we're dealing with now. Affordability, house prices, this has been 2 decades in the making. Actually, if you do some historical referencing, it started back in 1970 and slowly progressed since then. And why is that? A lot of it has to do with trying to eliminate deficits, not investing in the public sector with public housing, multi-use housing. And that's created the problem. You haven't figured out yet that by having balanced budgets, you've actually created a problem where there's not enough money in the system to help the people, to help create the supports that build up the people. And then what happens? The private sector makes up for it. The private sector is based on risk. And what happens? You end up with boom and bust cycles because it's the private sector putting money into the economy that is speculative, and then you have that problem. You had CDSs, default swaps, credit default swaps that caused the 2008 crisis. So there's a lost decade under the Stephen Harper, Pierre Poilievre government. And then you had COVID, which created a lost decade and inflation spike under the Trudeau government. But instead of taking responsibility for what happened, people have to point fingers and politicking instead of doing what they should be doing, is working for the people and creating an environment that actually lifts up people, doesn't suppress them, and nobody gets that. And a conservative government especially does not get it, because once you balance these budgets, you're giving a pass to the private equity sector to gamble. That's how you have these boom and bust cycles. You just do not get it. Let's go back to the video here.
Otherwise, they are enabling the Chinese military.
Okay, so this is the next big thing. So now we're going to go to the 4-minute mark because this is important. It ties into what my point is here. Okay, what's this here? Presidential actions, February 1, 2025. Imposing duties to address the flow of illicit drugs across our northern border. Really? Fentanyl, and then you use that same excuse to take over Venezuela. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, back in the early 2000s, was used by organized crime, and he knew about it, to put his name on buildings starting in Panama. The lawyer that organized all this, who had been dealing with the Russians since the early 1990s, beginning in 1990s, said, Donald, listen, we're just going to do management service agreements. Let us do all the rest. We'll give you an override for the money that we collect from the Russian money laundering scheme we're doing, and the Mexican drug cartel scheme we're doing, and the Colombian drug cartel scheme we're doing. You can get an override and all that stuff. Donald said, fine. I'll make friends with everybody in Panama and everywhere I go. And then who was one of his best friends? Everybody's his best friend when things are going into his pocket, and that was Martinelli, that was the president of Panama. So here we have February 1, 2025, imposing duties to address the flow of illicit drugs across our northern border. That's just an excuse to be the predator, an economic predator against Canada. That's all it is. You look at Project 2025 and the people that are in government that made Project 2025 a document, and the national security document, all from Project 2025 peoples. And now they've got to do a different way of national security and to address a different situation of national security. And it's going to be Chinese vehicles are supporting the Chinese military. So what's the real problem? The Real problem is America's abused their privilege of creating the financial situation and framework that everybody has to use around the world. Now they're going to use it to their advantage as a predator to capitalize on the harm they're going to cause to others for their benefit. Donald Trump is a zero-sum guy. He can't lose in negotiations. He wants to just win, win, win. And what do you see from this guy when he doesn't get his way? He gets mad. The art of a deal. He can't do the art of a deal. It's smoke and mirrors to prop him up, to sell a vision that really never existed. And he's been riding on the coattails of that ever since that show, The Apprentice, went live. The producer made Trump into something that he was not. Back to the video.
This was the official announcement from the White House, imposing duties to address the flow of illicit drugs across our northern border. When the United States just made up a national security threat, saying drugs are pouring into our country from Canada. The actual truth is that the main problem with the border is that there are illegal guns pouring into Canada from the United States, but that's besides the point. So they just made this up as an excuse to use some emergency powers to impose their first set of tariffs on us. It was all BS, but some politicians in Canada just took the bait, and it's almost like they were on the American side. Daniel Smith was the first one to jump side by side with the president. Smith said Canada should stop making excuses and address the president's concerns to avoid tariffs. Do you remember Daniel Smith's comments back then? All we have to do is fix our border, and then the United States won't impose tariffs on us. It's our fault. The president's absolutely right.
And then from that, the conservatives created, we've got a border crisis. Did the exact same thing Trump MAGA was doing. All the criminals are seeping through the border. Right. The immigrants are actually pretty good people. It's the native people to a country like Canadians and Americans that are ones that are major are criminals. Small portion of immigrants run into that situation, but it's only a small portion. They just want to start a new life for the most part. And that's really what has been going on. So conservatives make this issue, which was basically, there may be some merit to it, because there's always some merit to something, but it's blown out of proportion to make it into a crisis. You make it into a crisis, you create fear. This is how you get support that would not otherwise be your support, because the fear you created, because you spun a story, crying wolf, and created a non-existent situation for the most part, or very minimal situation.
Should stop wasting time and just fix the border. That's all he wants. He wants us to fix the border and stop the drugs from flowing in there, and then we won't have any tariffs. Yeah, right. And then when our prime minister returned from China with a deal, China removing all tariffs on agricultural and seafood products, which would help basically every province in Canada.
And you have to remember, this tariff situation with the Chinese started because of our relationship with the Americans being so intertwined with America, and the car sector being so intertwined with America and Mexico. That's why you had a North American free trade agreement. But the Americans put it upon us that we have to 100% tariff electric vehicles in China. So the Americans created the problem with their trading partner. And so the Chinese reacted. They're a lot more powerful than they used to be. If you go to China, any of the major cities, Shenzhen, let's take a smaller city like Shenzhen, still 30 million people. They live a good life, actually, for the most part. Very different from what you think. So the Americans are living in fear. Conservatives in Canada want to create that same fear because they see how it works down south. And then who pays the penalties? The people. Best electric vehicles in the world are Chinese made. It's about time you started realizing that. Let's get back to this video.
Canada, and we were allowing 49,000 EVs in exchange, Doug Ford sprung to action, calls for Chinese EV boycott in Canada after Carney deal. Doug Ford was furious about that deal and was urging Canadians to boycott Chinese EVs.
Another notwithstanding clause Premier Doug Ford, thicker than a brick. Now he's got J.P. Morgan. Somehow J.P. Morgan controls the financial interest of Billy Bishop Airport in Toronto. And what's Doug Ford doing? Typical Doug Ford stuff, exercise and control, when he really should be letting the professionals do it. But here's the real point. J.P. Morgan should not be controlling an island airport in Toronto. No American interest should be controlling a major Canadian asset like that. This is where we've got to change things.
Before they even got here, they were going to come here to spy on us. Do you remember that rhetoric? Just eating up the American rhetoric. And you have to understand the irony here, right? The United States, I showed you that chart of their industry, their auto industry that's not growing and how worried they are about China's ascent. They're attacking China with 100% tariffs, and now they've escalated with this new measure. But you have to understand that they're also attacking Canada. They also have tariffs on our manufactured cars, not just the Chinese. And here's Doug Ford saying we should boycott Chinese EVs, not American cars. There's 100% tariffs on the import of Chinese vehicles in the...
Meanwhile, south of the border in the United States, they've gone to a strictly gasoline and hybrid model. And that is a situation that the government under Trump has created. So that is why Japanese manufacturers in Canada are not making EV vehicles anymore. North American manufacturers are not making EV vehicles anymore because there's no market south of the border for them. So why would you not allow Chinese EV vehicles to come in? They're the best in the world. They make the best product, and they make it at a price that is very competitive, better than competitive. And that is the reality.
US. And there's also 25% tariffs on the import of Canadian automobiles in the United States. They're attacking us as well. But Doug Ford just couldn't understand that and fell into the trap, just like Daniel Smith. We just have to agree with the Americans. We should put tariffs back on the Chinese EVs, and then the Americans will love us again, and we'll get a really good deal. And in the meantime, our farmers and our fishermen will have to deal with the Chinese tariffs and go out of business. The latest one that was just announced last week is the president is to hit more than 60 countries, including Canada, with new tariffs over forced labor.
So that's the new excuse. Before it was fentanyl coming across the border. Then they switched to Section 232 and the 300s, 200 the 300 legislation, old legislation in the States that hasn't been used for a long time. But this is how they're honing their predatory skills to everybody else in the world to benefit the Americans. Just have to understand it's a Smoot-Hawley tariff trick. That's all it is. This guy Trump loves tariffs. He's trying to relive the Herbert Hoover era because he thinks tariffs are the way to do it. They're predatory. They caused the Great Depression to last a lot longer than what the Great Depression should have lasted. And with these tariffs, you're creating financial hardship around the world. And then you block the Strait of Hormuz so that the world's supply of light crude is no longer accessible. So you're creating an energy crisis and a financial crisis, which is going to create an economic crisis for everybody affected that relies on that energy from the Middle East. And it's all created by the United States for the benefit of the United States. Take over Venezuela, trying to eliminate Iran, doing it with Israel. Israel is another story which we need to discuss. And then after Iran's done with, you're going to take over Cuba. And then after Cuba's taken over, who's it going to be next? You blame everybody for everything that's happened to you in America. Meanwhile, America created all the problems. It's a made in America crisis so that they can benefit by doing what they want to justify divide and conquer strategy that goes back to pretty much the beginning of modern time. Conqueror and the conquest of 1049 AD. So this is where we're at. And then you got thick as a brick.
I'm just waiting for a conservative politician to jump in front of the cameras now and say, hey, all we have to do is stop using forced labor and the United States will drop the tariffs. They're our friends. They love us. We'll get a great deal if we just stop using forced labor. It happens over and over and over again. All of these measures that the United States is using are just BS. They're just made up excuses because they want to become more protectionist. They are closing off from the rest of the world. They're petrified that China will surpass them. And that's why they're imposing these ridiculous measures. But conservative politicians just can't help but regurgitate their talking points.
Only conservatives will stand up for the hardworking people who build this country. We will ensure you can drive your pickup truck, you can put fuel in it.
Only conservatives will continue to parrot U.S. policies and stand up for your right to continue buying overpriced vehicles manufactured in the United States and paying a lot for diesel and gasoline if the Americans start another war. Only conservatives will stand up for your right to continue to do that. Now, it's just comical to me. It's almost like a joke that these conservative politicians, they don't see it. They still believe that we live in a world that, well, maybe they do see it. They just want to be American. They want to be connected to the United States. And they think if we just agree with everything they want to do and we just follow every single policy that they have, that they'll just be nice to us and everything.
And then after you've done everything that you think you need to do to be nice to them, you get abused and used and spit out the other end. So it's about time Canadians looked out for themselves. This is why we need a different direction. Conservative policies do not work because they do not know how the economy really works. Even in Alberta could have invested in their natural resources industry, but has the Alberta government invested, taken any risk? No. They just blame the federal government. And that's the reality, folks. Questions, comments, throw in the comments section. Let go of this pain and suffering, change the way we do things, move into a state of benevolence, harmony, and abundance. No need for pain and suffering. Only the mind creates pain and suffering. Let that go. Love and peace. Ciao for now. Talk to you all soon.